The following is a special video presentation of the Hennepin County Library.
Welcome to a discussion with Octavia Butler. My name is Kay Drockey. Octavia, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Hoping you're enjoying the Minnesota weather.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
As a Southern Californian, I know I'm going to have a ball. I'll be lucky to go home healthy.
I know you've been traveling around the country doing interviews quite a bit. I heard you last week on the First Friday interview. You were talking about writing as a child. And how old were you when you started writing?
10 years old.
10 years old. Now, was that like a secret project, or did you have encouragement from friends and family to write?
Neither. It was just something I enjoyed doing. I had been telling myself stories since I was 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I was beginning to forget some of them. So I started to write them down. I found someone's old used notebook that they'd thrown out, and there were some pages left, so I just started writing my stories down. And my mother asked me what I was doing, and I told her I was writing a story, and she just casually said, "Oh, maybe you'll be a writer someday." And that was my first clue that there were people who wrote for a living, and you could be a writer. You didn't have to be a nurse or an accountant or something really tiresome.
Yeah. Did any of those childhood ideas show up in some of the novels that we've read?
Not the earliest ones, no. They were really childhood fantasies, the kind that don't make enough sense to show up in novels later.
Yeah.
The ones that, the first science fiction pieces that I began writing when I was 12 did show up. As a matter of fact, they showed up as my Patternist series, Pattern Master, Mind of My Mind, Survivor, some of the others.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting, yeah. Now, is the Patternist series kind of done? Are you finished with that universe?
It probably is. Every now and then I threaten to go back and write one more about Doro, taking him back to his origins. And people keep saying that I should, but I'm not sure that's what I want to do now. It's not what I'm thinking about right now.
Right. Well, and it may come to you at some time.
Mm-hmm.
Then the 3 Xenogenesis novels, they stand by themselves pretty much.
Yes, Dawn
too.
Adulthood Rights and
Right.
Imago, and they are a trilogy.
Yeah.
So they Kindred is solitary.
Yeah.
Someone asked me yesterday whether I would be writing another Kindred novel. No.
No. Well, that one's pretty self-contained. I hear you said that they're teaching that in school some places now.
Yes. Little children are being forced to read my books now.
And
I'm not sure how to take that.
well, are you ever going to write any children's books? Have you thought about that?
No, it's not something that I've wanted to do. Generally, I want to comment on things that interest me, that get me passionate in one way or another, angry, hopeful, whatever. I need to write about things that make me care about them.
Mm-hmm. You write a lot about power and empowerment, and one thing that I noticed in reading Parable of the Sower was that, with the exception of Kindred, there's been outside forces. You know, there's the alien virus in the Patternist.
You
psychic
said
things.
Oh, I see.
And now we're back to and the aliens with their genetic plan for humanity in the Xenogenesis novels, and now you're back to kind of like humanity
having to solve its own problems.
Yeah, solving its own problems, and
that was really what I intended to do. Parable of the Sower is a cautionary tale about the world that we're liable to create if we're not careful. The world we will create if we keep doing a lot of the things that we've been doing.
yeah.
If we keep neglecting education and using the money to build jails, that kind of thing, neglecting libraries. One county in California actually closed its libraries. I don't know whether it was whether they were ever reopened, but imagine a whole county closing its public libraries. And a lot of LA County libraries did close, and school libraries. So I'm very much aware of a bad situation with libraries.
Yeah.
Can I tell you an anecdote about
Sure.
that? Okay, the nicest birthday present I've ever had was something that happened on my birthday a few years ago. My own hometown, Pasadena, voted to tax itself to keep the libraries open. And that's rare.
Yeah.
Usually a tax bond like that will go down to defeat, and this one passed about 70% positive.
Wow, that's
So,
great.
mhm.
Yeah, we have high library use here, but it's still hard to keep people aware that there's a direct impact in what they pay and what they get in services. And it's hard when you're competing with important other social services too. For
True,
money.
true, but sometimes neglecting a thing like that is neglecting the future.
Yeah.
I practically grew up in the library, so it's very important to me.
So what are you going to do when you start hearing that people are forming budding Earthseed groups?
Oh my.
I read the book and I thought, yeah.
I kind of worried about that. I mean, I had the example of L. Ron Hubbard, and that wasn't exactly what I had in mind, so I haven't encouraged anything like that.
Well, one thing that really amused me about the heroine of Earthseed is she's on the road traveling, and one of her companions says, people are gonna change this. They're gonna make it not what you want. And she's, not while I'm around, they're not, which I think is pretty amusing for the proponent of a change.
Exactly, it's a silly statement.
Yeah.
And at some point, especially in Parable of the Talents, she does realize this, but she still fights it. Because she's afraid that it will change to such a degree that it will no longer be useful in the way that she wants it to be useful. And she's no doubt right.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of not just how much it changes, but when the change takes place. And if it takes place too quickly, too soon, then it'll just be another religion come and gone.
Yeah. Instead of being more like a philosophical change in the way that culture perceives.
And also with the destiny. I mean, someone reviewed the book and thought of the destiny. By the way, that I don't know how much your viewers will know about this novel, but it is a near future novel of a woman who creates a new religion or philosophy as a kind of tool for a very distressed society, a society that's self-destructing like mad. And I've lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
They were talking about the destiny and the.
Yes. Oh, yes. And the destiny of this philosophy, this religion, this Earthseed, is. She says the destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars, and she means it literally. That if we're going to go to heaven, we'll have to do it while we're alive.
Yeah.
And if humanity is going to survive for any length of time, it had better go to heaven. So she's made space travel part of her religion, the necessity for it part of her religion.
Yeah.
And she's quite serious about that.
I don't suppose they've been lucky enough to have the Clay's-Ark version of
A disease?
psionic drive
There's
engines.
nothing. No. No, I really did try to make this one as realistic as I could, so that there are no powers, magical, psionic, or otherwise. They're just people with lots of different struggles. My character has a kind of disability that some people have taken for a psionic power, which I find interesting. She is what she calls a sharer. She has something called hyperempathy syndrome, and it causes her to suffer from the delusion that she feels the pain of other people, literally physical pain. If she sees someone with a broken arm, her own arm is pretty much useless because of the pain she's suffering. It's not an emotional thing where she feels the pain of somebody who's weeping because his mother has died or something, but it's a purely physical sharing, and it's a kind of biological conscience because it does prevent her from hurting people unless she's willing to suffer along with them.
Well, you mentioned it as delusional, but I know that in the book she talks about how as a young child she actually bled with other people. You know, if her brother got a cut on his arm, she would bleed with him.
But she also bled when he pretended to have a cut and used red ink or something.
Yeah.
It is delusional.
Okay.
And it's amazing what the mind can do. I mean, people under hypnosis can be made to bleed
Well, that's
through the skin, that kind of thing.
Religious thing too with the
Yes, the stigmata, yes.
yeah, and that kind of
As a matter of fact, at one point I thought of titling the book that, but it seemed to me that was taking the reader in the wrong direction.
Yeah. I think Parable of the Sower refers a lot more directly to, you know, she's clearly out sowing her earth seed. That brings me to a curiosity question of mine. Are you a gardener?
My mother is a gardener. I live in a place that has no yard, so I'm not a gardener.
I just wondered because you have a lot of gardening and plants and a real casual but accurate attention to that in your book.
I was trying to be accurate. Some of it I got from helping my mother with her garden. She's 80, and every now and then I go over and help her, and she tells me what I'm doing wrong. She's just a perfectionist, and she wants things done just so, so I learn from her. And also I take a 4-mile walk in the morning. And while I was working on this book, I would keep a list of what I saw growing in people's yards. And in Pasadena, people who have yards have gardens. So whether it's a vegetable garden or a flower garden, I mean, there's something growing. You know, there's a fig tree, there's an orange tree, loquats, whatever. I mentioned pomegranates to my friend in Connecticut, and I realized now, after talking to her, that there are parts of the country where people don't know what a pomegranate is.
Or at least not, it grows on a tree.
Well, it grows on a bush.
A bush,
okay. A kind of it can be pruned into a tree, but left alone it's a big bush.
Yeah. And they're very unusual looking fruits.
Yeah, full of seeds and juice.
Now you mentioned a sequel to Parable of the Sower.
Yes, the next book is Parable of the Talents, and I'm working on it now, and it's fighting me.
Okay. Do you have other things in the works?
My publisher is going to do Four Walls, Eight Windows. I mean, not Warner. Warner did the paperback of Parable of the Sower and has done several of my other books in paperback. The hardcover publisher of Parable of the Sower is Four Walls, Eight Windows, and they're going to do a short collection of my, it can only be a short collection, a collection of my short stories. And since I'm not really a short story writer, that means maybe 5 short stories and some introductions that I have yet to write.
Now, you mentioned that you've won both the Hugo and the Nebula, am I correct?
Yes.
And what was that for? What were they for?
Well, those were for short stories.
That's what I thought.
That's why I think there is the interest in doing the collection.
Yeah.
I don't write very many short stories because most of the ideas that I get are novel ideas. But I have got, let's see, as I said, I think about 5 short stories.
Okay.
And
2 of which won major award.
Two of them won Hugos, and one of the 2 won novels. Bloodchild won the Hugo and the Nebula, and Speech Sounds won the Hugo. And The Evening and the Morning and the Night was nominated for the Nebula, but didn't win.
Well, that's a pretty impressive track record. 5 stories. 3 nominations, 2 winners.
I've always been dissatisfied because I'm a novelist, and none of my novels have won.
Well, yeah, I don't know. You cram all those ideas into in a short story. That's hard to do. I was curious about your sources and influences. I know on the First Friday interview you were talking about The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat and some of the other things that you'd been reading. Can you talk a little more about that? Where you get your background or ideas?
Actually, I was talking about those more in connection with getting hyperempathy syndrome together as a disability.
As source material.
It's a result of the syndrome is a result of my character's mother taking a drug that she hoped would make her smarter. It was a very popular drug, and it actually worked. It was just highly addictive and did a lot of harm to the fetus if the woman happened to be pregnant. So, and since it was highly addictive, naturally, when a woman became pregnant, it was very difficult for her to give it up. And my character's mother does die in childbirth, possibly because of some effect of the drug. but as a result of that, my character has hyperempathy syndrome. And I did feel a need to have more of an idea of what the mind could do to a person, what a little imbalance in brain chemistry could cause.
Yeah.
And those books that I mentioned, the boy who couldn't stop washing, the man who mistook his wife for a hat, and a series by Burton Ruchet called The Medical Detectives. Those were really useful
Okay.
in just getting an idea what your problems, how your problems, that seem completely mental problems, can be a result of a physical disability.
Sure, sure. What about people as influences? Your books are filled with strong female characters in particular. I notice them myself for some reason. And I was wondering if that's like your mother, whom you mentioned as being, 80
Well,
and
it's
still going
probably
strong.
everyone I've met. And it doesn't confine itself to women examples. When I wrote my second book, Mind of My Mind, I needed someone who could kind of help me make my character feisty. And I looked around and I found a couple of men who were feisty, and I thought, well, I'll see if I can combine their personalities and turn them as feminine as I dare, and see what happens. And that's how I wound up with Mary Larkin in Mind of My Mind.
Okay. Okay.
So I can create, and I can borrow from living people, and sometimes I find myself watching, for instance, an actor or an actress become a character. I don't mean watch them do a play. I mean, for instance, if on a talk show or in some other situation, I see them suddenly become a character for you, and you see what they do, how it's almost scary.
Yeah.
I had someone do that in my living room once, and I remember being just a little bit alarmed that a young, attractive woman suddenly seemed to be a very old and sickly woman, and she did it so well. That's the kind of thing that I look at and I kind of take into my work, as to how I can create characters.
Well, that seems like it would be really useful. Do you read much science fiction and fantasy?
Not as much as I used to, because I don't have the time.
Yeah.
You get into writing it because you love it, and then you don't have time to read as much of it as you want to anymore.
Yeah. Are there some of those other authors that you look on as having been influential in your...
In early cases, there are authors. I used to read a lot of Theodore Sturgeon when I was a kid, a lot of John Brunner, because he wrote a lot. I mean, every 2 months or so, I could get another John Brunner book.
Yeah.
Marion Zimmer Bradley, the same thing. Whenever I went to the store, it seemed she had another one, so I'd buy it and read it.
Sure.
Harlan Ellison, who was one of my teachers, whenever I found another of his books of short stories, I'd buy them and read them. Let's see, Robert Silverberg, who wrote a lot, and was a good writer, somebody you could learn from. Sturgeon the same way, especially learning about writing. A number of people that I could learn from, yes, but later I became more interested in individual works. And I guess I acquired a strange set of favorites. One is everybody's favorite science fiction novel, I guess, Dune.
Okay.
There is another one, Perfume by Patrick Susskind, very odd book. Replay by Ken Grimwood, which is sort of a time travel story, but not quite, and one of the best I've read. Those are the three that
What
come to
about
me
some
right
women?
now. Ursula K. Le Guin's The Dispossessed,
Sure.
and let's see.
It's hard to think of
I mentioned Marion Zimmer Bradley
Right,
early
right.
on, so yeah. One of the first adult science fiction I ever read was a short story, or I guess it would be classified as a novella, by Lee Brackett and Ray Bradbury, and it turns out it was Ray Bradbury's first published fiction. She began it, and I don't know what the story is there, but he wound up finishing it. And it was a story called Lorelei of the Red Mist. and I bought it back in the days when I was going to secondhand bookstores and finding old magazines and novels for a nickel or a dime. So that was one of the ones I found. Very glad to have found it.
Yeah, it's great to have those, and like you remember them forever.
Mm-hmm.
They stick with you.
Yeah, any first you tend to remember.
The
Well,
power issues. That's what I was thinking about. You seem to talk a lot about power and empowerment in your novel.
well, I've written a lot of my novels have power as a kind of secondary theme. I began writing about power because I felt so powerless, and power was something I wanted to look at. And leadership was, I mean, the power to lead other people, or the power to, not necessarily take charge. What do I want to say? Take personal responsibility. That was important because I wrote about over and over again people who saved their people. And that's a change really for me. In Parable of the Sower, I'm not writing about a woman who saves her people. I'm writing about a woman who needs to save herself and give other people the tools to save themselves. So maybe I'm getting old, I don't know. That's the kind of change that takes place in your writing sometimes. But early on, I paid a lot of attention to what power did to people, what they did with power, how they acquired it. Usually they acquired it in my earlier books either by inheriting it or by getting it as a huge responsibility that they had to do something about. But in Parable of the Sower, I wrote about power as, my character had to be a kind of power seeker, not to be some sort of dictator or something, but simply because, in effect, she was saying, follow me, I've got something that'll be useful to you that you can, build on. And just to be able to do that, she has to have a lot more confidence than I think most people have, especially if they're building something new. It's a lot easier to say, follow me, my church is the right church, and it's been in existence for 2,000 years or 5,000 years or whatever. But when you've got something that you have put together out of truths that you feel that you have observed, then it takes a lot more ego.
Hi, I'm 18 and I have a plan.
Well, actually, it had to be a kid.
Yeah.
Because who else would have both the nerve and, in a way, the stupidity? I mean, it's almost a bumblebee thing. She has no idea how impossible it is, so she does it.
Yep. Yeah, she doesn't really realize the challenges, and then she does in a way.
She's afraid. She realizes she doesn't know what she's doing, but she can't not do it. I used my own writing as an example. There was no reason for me to suppose that I could write science fiction for a living. Nothing in my background. Certainly nothing in the encouragement that I was getting from anybody else. I mean, there were people who said nice things, but especially before I was 23 and went to Clarion, the nice things that I heard were pats on the back. They were like, well, don't make the kid feel bad.
Yeah.
And I could, there's no way you can miss that sort of thing when you're being humored or even condescended to. And I didn't know whether I really could write or not, but I knew I had a talk with myself, and I thought, how much do I want this? What if I can never be anything more than a hack, for instance, somebody who does the kind of work that might work out well in comics or something. And I mean, I don't mean to put down comic writers, but when I was saying this, the big comic was Superman in DC Comics, and
it's evolved as a genre quite a bit.
Yeah. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But I thought, well, what if that's the only sort of thing I can do? Do I still want to be a writer? And the answer was yes, I do.
Yeah.
So I realized I wanted it enough so that whatever it cost, I was going to try to do it.
So you went to Clarion?
I did. Clarion Science Fiction Writers Workshop. It was in Clarion, Pennsylvania when I went. And I think my year was about the third year of Clarion's existence.
Okay.
And the last year in Pennsylvania. There were some really fine writers who came out of my year, Vonda McIntyre, George Alec Effinger,
Oh, wow.
Dave Scull, number of people who are not coming to me right now, but who have written quite a bit. Robert Thurston. It was a good experience. It was a kind of science fiction boot camp. You know,
Yeah.
you go there and you get told the truth about your work, and it can be startling.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was maybe a turning point for you in a way, in the sense of giving.
In a
you-
way, it was a couple of ways. One, I realized, yes, I really can write. You know, these other people who are here and who are serious are not better writers than I am. And that might sound egotistical, but I felt it to be true, and you know, I needed to think along those lines. The other thing was I sold a couple of pieces, and that was important.
Was that the first time you'd sold anything?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
well, that is a turning point then. And you are an
Except
excellent
that
writer.
I didn't sell another word for 5 years. So
Now, was that the transition from short stories to novels there?
yes. I was writing short stories and sending them out and getting them back by return mail, and be feeling very frustrated.
Yeah.
And having my mother or some other relative call up and say, "Why don't you get a real job?" I was doing minimum wage jobs and whatever I could find.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So that you could devote time to your writing. Yeah. Occasionally people say, "Oh, writing, yes, and how can I get into that?" Well, it was kids doing career day, and this couple of young women wanted to know about writing and what hours do authors work and how much do they get paid? And I said, they work all the time and they don't get paid much.
Well, now, I was at a conference in Chicago last year, and somebody raised a hand and said, if I go into writing, do you think I'll be able to make $50,000 my first year? And I said, no.
No.
And I also said, what have you written? Well, I haven't written anything yet, but I have these ideas. It's not going to work out.
Stick with your your day job, yeah.
Yes.
Because it's going to be a long road from that point of view.
Yeah, it's not a matter of, oh, well, you have to suffer for your art and be poor, but you do have to learn your craft, and it takes a while. And it's like any other way of life, more so than just a profession, because it does kind of take over your life. I've noticed that a lot of the male writers I know have been married more than once, because they've got this first wife called writing. And the other wives don't care much for the idea, I guess.
Yeah, and you have to cross that hurdle too, where once you've had a successful novel, it's easier to go on and do it.
It's dangerous too. After a while, you can even get really bad stuff published.
Yeah.
And
doesn't
you have to be the one to say, I can't do that.
Well, that doesn't seem like it's been a problem for you, Vonda. It's been wonderful having you
Thank
here
you.
with us today. And, for the rest of you, please join us again for A Discussion With.
A presentation of the Hennepin County Library.